Hello there, and welcome to the first of what I hope will be many 3D Studio Max tutorials. This one is a very basic tutorial on how to create text, how to change it to 3D, and we'll use three different methods to change the text from what is essentially a 2D shape into a 3D object. So we'll get started here. For those of you who are just running up 3D Studio Max for the first few times, I'll go through just basically and very quickly what we're looking at here. Here we've got 4 viewports where we can design whatever we happen to want to design. Okay, we're going to be using probably the front and the perspective. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to maximize this front viewport here using Alt W. You can also come down to the bottom right hand corner and use this little switch here, maximize viewport toggle. So I'll just click on the front viewport and I'll use Alt and W. And there we go, it has blown that viewport to fill the whole viewport, so we're just left with one. What we're going to do now is create some text. So if we look over here, this is our command panel. This is the create part of the command panel. Over the next few tutorials we'll only be using the create and the modify parts of this command panel. Okay, so what we're going to do now is come down here and just take a look at what these little buttons here are. We've got geometry, so within here we can create cones, tubes, boxes, spheres, whatever it says here. We're going to go to shapes and we'll take a look what we've got here. Line, rectangle, circle, ellipse, and so on down to the bottom. What we're going to look at is text. So all I'm going to do is click text. Okay, we get some parameters here which I'll go over very shortly. I'm just going to move up slightly above this black cross here, which is the origin of our scene, and I'll go through that in a later tutorial as well. So I'm just going to click here and we get max text. Okay, important thing to realize now is that we really want to right click so we come out of this creation mode, so we're no longer creating text. I'll just right click to cancel that. So there we go, and now what we've got is our text up here. Okay, now it's slightly out of the screen, so what I want to do is move this down. Okay, so we can either move the text down or we can move the view down. Okay, so we'll move the actual text. So I've come up here to the select and move tool. I'm just going to highlight the y-axis here. Okay, and I'm just going to drag it down so that the bottom of it is roughly on this black line. Okay, so what can we do from here? Well, if we look over here, we're still in create mode here. So I'm going to switch to modify mode, which is this little bendy bar as I call it. Okay, so I'm just going to click here, and now we see all the parameters that we can change for our text object here. Okay, first thing I'm going to do, and I would encourage you to do this for every single thing that you create in 3D Studio, and that is to give it a name. At the minute it's called text 001. So I'm going to click up here and I'm going to take out the 001. I'm going to leave text in because it lets you sort your items in some other views later on, and it makes things a little bit more organized. So I'm just going to go text, I'm going to call it my name and hit enter. Okay, now you'll notice this text has not changed. All this is a name so that we can easily identify this object, this text object, in our scene, because you could end up with hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands, of objects in a scene. If you don't name them, it doesn't matter when you've only a few objects, but when you build up the numbers of objects, if you don't have things named properly, you'll be in a world of pain. Okay, so what we've got now, let's just take a look here. Or in actual fact, we'll just go straight to here. Okay, this is where we can edit the actual text. So I'm just going to go in here and delete it, and I'm going to type Pete. Okay, so you can see it comes up in real time as you type. I'll just get rid of that. Okay, there's my text going. Okay, so we've got this text object. We have a list of fonts that we can use here. Okay, so the easiest way to, if you don't know your fonts really well, and I don't, what I usually do is I just click in here and use the up and down cursor keys, and I can flick through. I can just click, 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 right down through to select a font that I like, and I'm going to go with that one for no other reason than I like the look of it for this tutorial. Okay, so what we can do now is come in and adjust our size here just by clicking and dragging. Okay, little tip here, you can, with wherever you see these little spinners in 3D Studio, you can right click to reset them to 0. I'll just type back in 100 here. You can hold Control to make them scroll much faster, and you can hold Alt to make them scroll much slower. Okay, just down brings the value down, up brings the value up. I'm just going to reset that back to 100. Like any other word processing software, you have kerning and leading here as well. We won't see leading because I only have one line. Okay. I'm not going to go into these options right now. I'm just going to minimize these. These are called rollouts. I'm just going to roll them up so that all we see are these basic parameters for the text. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is change my view. I'm going to have a look around this text. So let's just go up to here. This is our view cube, which I don't use very much. I'm going to show you how to use it very basically, and then I'm going to teach you the keyboard commands to do the same thing. We can go up here and click on front and just drag, and you can see we're looking around our scene. Okay, we can grab the little compass rose and that will rotate around. We can click front, we can grab the corner here and go around it. There's our back view. Okay, so I'm going to go back to my front view. I'm just going to press F on the keyboard. F for front view. Okay, I'm now going to type P for perspective view. P. Now, I want to look around this now without having to use this view cube. So I'm just going to hold down Alt, and I'm going to click my middle mouse button and drag, and I find this a much easier way to look around my scene than to use the view cube. If we just use my scroll wheel, we can scroll in and out, and if I hold down Control and click middle mouse button, we can move our view around. Don't confuse moving a view around with moving an object around. This is just the view we're moving here. That object is staying still. Okay, so how do we change this into a 3D object? We use what are called modifiers. Okay, here's our modifier list. I'm just going to click it. We get a list, a very confusing list when you're looking at it for the first time. A lot of these things, the names are going to be self-explanatory. For instance, bend and twist, which is down here somewhere. Okay, we have other things like which may not be so obvious to the beginner. For instance, UVW X form, or something like patch deform. Okay, so a lot of them are self-explanatory, a lot of them are quite cryptic. The one we're going to use now is Extrude. So I'm just going to come down and click Extrude. Nothing happens so far. I'm just going to go back into my Alt middle mouse button and just take a look around. Okay, we have nothing happened here yet. We still have a 2D shape, but you'll notice on this panel our options have now changed. We no longer see the options for text here. We now see the options for extrude. So all I'm going to do is click and drag this up, and you can see now it has extruded this 2D shape out to form a 3D object. Now it doesn't look solid at the minute. I'm going to use another keyboard shortcut here, which is F3, to change the view to a solid view. And again, Alt middle mouse button just to look around. So there is how to create the most basic form of 3D text that there is. What I'm going to do is take you through two more methods of doing this. Okay. So the second method is using a different modifier called Bevel. Let's just take a look at Bevel. Now it should be under B here, but it's not here. Okay. The menu here is sensitive to what type of object you have selected in the viewport here. So what we need to do is change this back to a text object. We can't bevel something that's already been extruded. We can't add the bevel modifier to something that's already been extruded. So I'm just going to delete this modifier just by right clicking here and going down and left clicking on delete. And we get back to our 2D shape. If I come back up to the modifier list now, we now have bevel. So I'm going to hit bevel. Default options, we will get just Alt middle mouse button again, infinitely thin text. Okay, so I'm going to roll up this parameters rollout here, and we'll just have a look at this one. Start outline. Let's just click and drag, because sometimes it's easier just to do these things to show you what they do. It's just moving the outline. It's making the outline bigger or smaller. I'm just going to reset that to 0, so it's back to default. These are the parameters which will give us a different, more advanced type of extrusion that we saw with the extrude modifier. So I'm just going to use this orbit button here to click inside this yellow circle. It does the same thing as Alt W, or sorry, not Alt W, as Alt middle mouse button. Okay, so Alt middle mouse button and left click with this tool selected are the same thing. Be careful of clicking outside the circle, because you can end up with your scene tilted to the side, which can be very confusing and distracting for the new user. You can always go View, undo view change, or Shift Z, and we'll come back to your perspective view here. So let's go back to here. Let's try the height. I'm just going to type these values in here, so it'll be a little bit easier. Let's go for 2. So what we've done, we've created what looks quite similar to the last extrude modifier. If I type in, say, 10, in fact it looks identical. But let's just take a look at what outline does as well. I'm going to put this back to 2 for now. And let's just look and see. I'll come in just and look at it a little bit closer up. So let's put in an outline of 2. So what we've got now is text which has been extruded here, and then we have this bevel effect coming out to here. If I drag this up, you can see, let's just get a slightly better view of that. Okay, I'll leave it at 2 for now. Let's turn on level 2. Nothing happens yet. we need to give it some values. Typically you'll want to use something which is higher than this value here in here. So let's say 5. And in actual fact I'll go to 10, make it a little bit more chunky, a little bit more solid looking. And usually you're not going to want to adjust the outline for level 2. So again, instead of having to select this and type in 0, I'm just going to right click the spinner. There we go. Okay, and now I'm going to turn on level 3. And again, nothing happens because everything's set to 0 here. So I'm just going to look at these values here, and I'm going to make this height the same as this height. You can see now we've got our line here, which corresponds to this line here. This hasn't came back in to give us that chiseled, hard chiseled edge look because we haven't put anything in the outline here. So let's just put 2 in here, and it goes out the way, which is probably not what we want. So let's try -2. And now we have some nice chiseled text. So I'm just going to deselect this just by right clicking here to come out of this orbit mode and then just left clicking. So we can see our text a little bit clearer now. Again, alt middle mouse button, I'm just going to have a look around. That's some reasonable looking text now. Okay, so I'm just going to select it again by left clicking. Let's say we don't want this hard chiseled look here. We want a more rounded look. Well, let's see how we can do that. We've set our bevel values here. I'm going to come into the parameters rollout and just expand it. And if we look down here, we'll ignore this for now. In fact, I'll just show you capping start and end. What that does, it just turns on and off the capping. We'll not worry about cap type. We'll go straight down to here and we'll go, instead of linear, which is a similar meaning to straight for straight edge here, we'll go curved segments, curved sides even. And again, we don't have curved sides. We're going to have to tell it how many segments we want in these curved sides. So let's just click 2, 3, 4, 5. You can see now we've got some curves coming in here. It doesn't look ideal. Usually you'll not want your text looking like that. You'll want the curves starting at this face and coming back off the text rather than coming out like this here. But we can change that using these parameters. So let's just take a look at the back, because this is the part that's affected by level 1. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hold down Alt so that when I drag this value it moves quite slowly. So I'm going to drag the height up until we see that edge getting pulled back like that. So 5.6 looks about fine. You can be fairly sure usually that if you've put in 5.6 here, that this should also be 5.6. So I'll just type it in here, 5.6. And there we go, we have some nice rounded text. Personally, I don't like this method. I don't find this very intuitive. It's hard to get the perfect curve that you might want. So what I'm going to do now is show you a much better way of creating 3D text. So the first thing I'm going to do, I'm just going to delete this bevel. I'm just going to delete, and we're back to our 2D shape. Okay, so what we're going to do is create another shape, a rectangle. I'm just going to create it down here. I'll just drag it out to roughly about that size. Doesn't have to be exactly these values. The reason I put it here is because this distance from here to here is going to be how far this text is extruded out. Okay, so it just makes it a little bit easier to see when it's sitting down beside it here. So I'm just going to right click to come out of this rectangle creation mode. Okay, and then I'll go back to my modify panel and we see the parameters for rectangle here. So let's just zoom in on this a little just with the mouse wheel so we can see. What I'm going to do is add some corner radius to this just to soften those hard edges. Something like that. Okay, so we now have a rectangle. How do we get this? What we're going to use is we're going to use a portion of this rectangle to be applied to sort of an extrusion to come out from this. Okay, a bevel. Sorry, we're going to use this as a profile for this shape. Okay, first thing we need to do but is we need to get rid of some of this. Okay, this is the reason why I like this method so much for creating text. I'm going to add a modifier to this called Edit Spline, and what this does, this lets us access the sub-object components of this rectangle. Okay, the sub-objects being vertices or vertex, which are these here. We have segments which connect vertices together, and we have spline, which is the entire line around the rectangle. Okay, what I'm going to do is delete most of these. So I'm going to delete from here round. I'm going to select this one, delete. I'm going to select this one, delete. Then I'm going to come back out of this segment mode just by clicking. So now we have a rectangle with an edit spline on top, and you'll see the reason why I do this in a second. I'm just going to turn this off so that you can see the portion that we deleted is actually still there from our rectangle. If we come back up to edit spline, nothing happens because I turned it off using the little light bulb. So let's just turn it back on, and because this edit spline contained instructions to delete this half of the spline, it gets deleted. So we can knock it on and off like this. Okay, so what we're going to do now is go back to our text object, and from the modifier list I'm going to choose Bevel Profile. And again, a bit like the bevel modifier from the last example, we just get a thin text. Okay, so these options are completely different from the last ordinary bevel modifier. So I'm going to go pick profile, and I'm just going to hover over here and go and just left click and select this shape that we made, and it appears here, rectangle 1. I'm going to rename this and call it text profile. Okay, now just going to go back to here, and you can see now our profile now contains text profile. So let's just take a look around this and let's just see what we've done here. Okay, I'm going to zoom right in here. You can see we've got a lovely round surface here. I'll just come away from there. Okay, you can still see a little bit of smoothing issues going on here. I'll show you how to fix that shortly. But the main thing why I like this method is that if I choose this rectangle, which is now our text profile with a portion deleted, I can come down to this rectangle object, just hit yes here, we'll not worry about that dialog for a minute, and we can go down to corner radius, and when we change the corner radius, the text automatically updates. This is a much more powerful method of creating 3D text than either the Extrude or the Bevel. I never use the Bevel modifier anymore. I always use Bevel Profile, which is what we're using here, or Extrude if I just want something rough to work with until I get round to putting Bevel Profile on. Okay, another thing which is good for here, we can go in and we can adjust the length. So we can make nice thin text with nice rounded edges. We can increase this length out. This one won't do anything because we have deleted all the other bits of the spline which were around here. So, but What would happen if we wanted that chiseled look back? Well, what we can do, this is why it's so powerful to do this, we can just turn these steps. Watch what happens to our text as I turn down this steps value. I'll just click it down. Don't see very many changes yet. You should be beginning to see it now. There's down to 1 segment. There's down to 0 steps. Let's just take a look now. We now have our chiseled text. If we want the chisel to be much more pronounced, we can go back into corner radius and just change it as we like. Okay, so that is the best method I have found for creating text. It's just so easy to change how your text looks. If you know a little bit more about splines or lines, let's just knock this back up, make it rounded again. Give it a little bit more corner radius just to make it a little bit more rounded. Make it a little bit deeper. You can actually come in here and start changing this spline a little bit more. And I wouldn't do it in here because this is what just creates the deleted part. Now, if we turn it back on, it completely messes up. That's not what we want at all there. So let's just come back in. And what we'll do now, we'll just turn this back on and I'll add yet another edit spline. Okay, what I would also encourage you to do, as well as naming your objects, is to start naming your modifiers. So edit spline I would rename as ES delete, so we know that's the edit spline modifier that deletes the parts, so we can knock it on and off. You can see that. This one I'm going to use I'm going to call it ES change profile. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is just change this straight segment. This straight segment obviously corresponds to what's in between the two curved bevels here. So let's just go into segment mode, and I could grab that and start pulling it out like that, but that's not really what I mean by changing it. I'm just going to undo that with Control Z. What I'm going to do is just use, if we scroll down here, I'm just going to divide it to give us another vertex in here that we can change. If I go back to vertex now, I can select this and start moving this out to create basically whatever shape of text that I like. That's quite nice there actually. It's unlikely you're going to want to do this, but using this method is so powerful that you can create a lot of pretty cool looking texts. Let's just pull it out. If we wanted the text to go the other way, we could change that from being that shape of curve to being, pull it out a bit. We can even pull it out past the other one, so we can get some, I don't know why you would ever want text like that, but the option's there if you do. Okay, so I'm just going to come out of sub-object mode. I don't really want my text looking like that, so I'm just going to turn that off and bring it back to normal. Okay, so what we looked at here was how to create text, how to adjust the font and size, and some other properties of the text. Then we looked at extruding with the extrude modifier to pull the text out to a 3D object. Then we looked at the bevel modifier, which I really don't like. It's a pain in the arse to use. And then we looked at this method here, which definitely is my preferred method of creating 3D text, using this Bevel Profile modifier and a shape to define the profile that runs around the outside of our text. So I hope you found this useful. Please leave comments down below. This is the first tutorial which I have made for 3D Studio Max, so I would really appreciate your comments. Again, this is a novice beginner tutorial. Hopefully, if I get some half decent feedback, I'll create something more advanced in the future. So good luck with your 3D maxing, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.